So you feeling good about this, Chris? If you need any more colors, I have a couple other colors in my. Oh, which reminds me, it's not my desk. I better go down there.
Have your attention, please. Thank you. We're going to get started. It's not an official meeting, but we'd like to welcome everybody to our budget open house. I'm Acting Mayor Rick Lochtenberg, sitting in for Mayor Morrison. I'll start with our Aboriginal acknowledgement. We'd like to acknowledge that the land in which we gather is the traditional territory of the Ktunaxa, the Syilx, and the Sinixt people, and is home to the Métis and many diverse Aboriginal persons. We honor their connection to the land and rivers and respect the importance of the environment to our strength as a community. The presentation today will be given by our CFO, Chris Jury, and our Deputy CFO, Amy Mooney. Over to you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Acting Mayor and folks out there. This is, again, just kind of a summary and overview of our draft financial plan. And, we welcome you to submit any questions you have. You can email us at budget@nelson.ca, and we'll provide your comments to council and answer any questions that you might have. But as far as format, we're just going to kind of give you an overview of the 5-year financial plan process, talk about our operating budget for the 2023 to 2027, our capital budget as well, a little overview of our utilities, water, wastewater, and hydro, and again, just kind of wrap up with any questions that folks might have. Before we get started, I thought we'd pass the floor over to our CAO, Kevin Cormack, to just talk a little bit about the city's vision and strategic goals.
Thanks, Chris. So you all see as part of this budget presentation where these strategic goals that were set by the previous council. This council will be meeting in May to review those and set strategic goals for the balance of their term and likely into the first part of the term of the next council. So we'll just give a quick update of what those are. I don't know if it's still up there. Oh, here it is. So there were 4 what we would call overarching or strategic goals, and within those there was a number of strategies to move those forward. The first one, enhance sustainability of city services and infrastructure, strengthening neighborhoods, expanding local jobs, local prosperities, and finally achieving excellence in city governance. And I'll just speak to a few of these. So in terms of enhancing sustainability of city services and infrastructure, one of the strategies was to develop and enhance our water supply. So we've done a number of things in that regard. We brought both our water systems, all 3 of our water sources together at Mountain Station Reservoir, where our treatment is. We've done a lot of work on water mitigation. We've established a secondary source out of the lake. We've established an emergency source out of the lake. We are exploring a secondary source. And we are looking at the viability of using our water system in the event of a wildfire and creating a fire protection system on our interface. We've looked at a number of things to do with the use of water, and I don't have the stats in front of me. Maybe Chris or Amy will speak on that later. Of our water usage per capita is significantly lower than it's historically been. I think it's at the lowest levels it's ever been. Even with growth, we're seeing that our water usage is down, and that's just more efficient fixtures and us addressing the leakage in our water mains. And finally, Mountain Station has been identified as a dam, so we've done work there to ensure it's safe. The next area was, under this major goal is to create an energy efficient community. Nelson Next was developed, it's in implementation. We've expanded the energy retrofit program. We launched first an employee e-bike program, and then that was, or e-bike purchase program, and that was expanded to community-wide. We did a large pilot program for the organics waste diversion, and we did a small pilot project, and the large pilot project will be launched shortly, so look out for that. BC Energy Step Code, the council adopted a number of policies on that. Embodied carbon, we've done work on there. In fact, Natalie Douglas, one of our employees, is actually at the coast and is eligible to win an award, and is participating as a panel member at BCIT. Working on the low carbon mobility plan, and also we put in a grant application for battery storage for Nelson Hydro. We also looked at improving our emergency management capabilities. At the start of the last council, that was a high priority, so we hired we brought that program in-house. It used to be delivered through the regional district, but we felt it was important that we bring that in-house and really put the energy in behind that. So we did do that. So an emergency management plan has been developed. Council adopted bylaws. We established our own emergency operations center. That opened in 2019. We hired a coordinator, and we just recently were just finalizing the new community wildfire resiliency plan, and we've had a number of grants and done a fair amount of fuel mitigation work, amongst other things, under that plan. Next was really an ongoing strategy of improving our infrastructure. Again, we updated our water master plan. So the first 10 years, we have implemented a number of things in that plan, and we updated the plan in 2020, 2021. Wastewater master plan is recently, again, a new version has been updated. Nelson Hydro is working through their asset management plan. The Civic Center, there's a deep energy retrofit grant we have. We're working with the society to do a major renovation there, including improving that accessibility there from about 5% now to, I believe, almost 95% when we finish this project. And hopefully people have noticed we've done a number of road and sidewalk improvements as part of that as well. So those are some of the highlights around that first major goal of city services and infrastructure. In terms of strengthening in our neighborhoods, the strategy was really encouraging a suitable mix of new housing. Our council approved just recently moving forward with official community plan review. We've seen a number of large developments over the last 4 years, including 3 affordable housing projects. And in 2023, in 2022, construction has started for the Nelson Health Campus. There's Central Waterfront development on the Central Waterfront down by the Walmart there. That is starting shortly. Vernon Street, the assisted living project here across from the Adventure Hotel, that's underway. We saw the Nelson Daily News development happen, the Victoria Street project happening, and a number of infill housing. And I think the stat is, I believe 65% of all new single-family dwellings are being built with secondary suites, so that adds to our housing mix as well. And we've done, councils did a major rezoning on the golf course lands. So there's a lot happening on that side. We also wanted to make sure our neighborhoods are well connected, so that downtown parking strategy was developed and adopted. We will be looking at Victoria Street as part of the transit exchange. We have funding for that, and Chris and Amy will talk about that. We're working with Selkirk College on the 10th Street campus lands to look at a mix of core campus lands and potential for development of those unutilized lands up there. Active transportation, phase 1 was completed. Phase 2 is in planning. We've recently had a neighborhood meeting on that one. We'll be finalizing that. We've applied for a number of grants. And then there's been great improvements to a number of our parks. Rosemont, Gyro, Cottonwood all have seen improvements. As far as local jobs, local prosperity, we wanted to, one of the things that local government does is actually build those community spaces that the public realm so that's public art, amenity spaces, etc. So probably the largest one here is the Hall Street Pier and the Ladybird projects. We are working with Selkirk College on an Indigenous gathering place. Downtown lighting has been done. Good news is, I think people may have noticed, Vernon Street lighting has been out for a while, and our electricians have found a solution for that, but there'll be a need for investment there. Council got an update a few meetings ago on the wayfinding signage and the Welcome to Nelson signage, so that's all completed and will be implemented over the summer. As I said, Cottonwood Park enhancement, there's been a number of enhancements there, a really good partnership with the Sushi Friendship Society, with the Cultural Development partner and Joy Barrett. We've got a number of grants for that to really enhance that. So if you haven't been down to Cottonwood lately, you should go down. It's just transformed. As has Rosemont. That was a really underutilized park, and it's really active now. Other areas where we're looking to create jobs and investment is Nelson Fiber. We've got a partnership with CBBC, that's Columbia Broadband Corporation, to extend the fiber into some other areas that we're not serving. Council's waived patio fees for 2020, 2021, 2022. We've really seen our downtown just even more lively with the patios. Council also approved a location for the new climbing center, and there was a presentation update of that just the other day. And Nelson Youth Soccer is proposing a indoor facility. Other things that we have done is really looking at what are we doing in our downtown and waterfront. As I mentioned, number of new projects there. We're really starting to finally see that development happening in our downtown and our waterfront, so that's exciting. Again, culture and sport, the Mural Fest continues to grow. Sculpture program is, I think in 7th, 8th, 9th year now, so that's exciting. The Civic Center Theater renewal should be kicking off soon. And, our economic development partnership continues to lead a number of projects from working with the cannabis industry to the Nelson Innovation Center, and focus a lot on retention and growth of our local businesses. And finally, the last goal, the most exciting goal, achieve excellence in city governance. But a number of really important strategic partnerships and hard work by council is lobbying for the Nelson Health Campus. That's underway now. That's a $20 million plus dollar project, and over 75 long-term care beds, plus the renewal of the public health spaces. Council worked really hard with Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure on signalizing the four-way stop at Baker Street, so that project should be out to tender, I believe, shortly. They've been a really important project, and I think anybody that uses that intersection, especially as a pedestrian, knows how important that is to have that upgraded. Again, really strong partnership with BC Housing to help shepherd a number of these projects along. Selkirk College, we're working with them on a regional homelessness strategy. We've worked with Nelson Cares on the Nelson Hub and other projects. Financial services program is still going strong. We support 4 small municipalities. I'm working in collaborating with the Regional District of Central Kootenay on Central Compost, so that's being developed, and we are, as I said, rolling out our pre-treatment program. And then we, how do we support our employees and grow our employees? So a number of, we had a department head meeting today, and just the amount of training that happens throughout our organization. We have a brand new HR team. I think that's going really well. We did some changes to the organizational structure. We just hired a new general manager. It'll start in May. And finally, around community engagement, a number of community engagement projects have happened. The largest one that's coming up is the official community plan. And the other thing, as I mentioned, councils is going to meet and set priorities for their term, and we're going to go out with a thought exchange to get feedback from the community of some of the things that council should think about. So we're so look for that online. Plus, our communications officer is going to go out there and take thought exchange on the to you. So whether it's the senior center, the library, and some other places. So we'll be going out to engage with the community. And those are a highlight of some of the things that council has been up to in the last 3 or 4 years and going forward. Back to Chris.
Okay, thanks, Kevin. That was a lot on one slide.
Yeah.
So just as far as the financial planning process, I mean, I was looking back and, if you count, we started working on Nelson Hydro's budget in August. Here we are. It's been, it's a year-long process. By the time we get to property taxes due date, we basically start again. So, there's a lot that goes on behind the scenes in consultation with all the different departments, and we work back and forth and try to find opportunities to save money, to be efficient, to hold budgets steady where we can. Some costs are outside of our control, but where we do have control, those are where the discussions really happen. We present several times to council over the past few months. All the department heads came and presented their plans and their operations to council. We prepared a draft budget, and here we are sort of in our public consultation piece where we share some of that with the public, although all those meetings have been open, and I welcome you to go back and take a look at any of those if you want more details on what's happening with water and wastewater and hydro and public works and parks, and there's a lot of information there for anybody who's interested to go back, and it's all online. So just as far as the timeline, here we are at our budget open house. We try to do this in March of every year. There are a few statutory deadlines that we need to adhere to. This year, we have May 12th is our deadline for adopting a 5-year financial plan and tax rate bylaw. That has to be done before May 15th of every year. Just with the weekend, May 12th is kind of our deadline. So we try to get that, obviously have to get that done before that date, so that we can get tax notices mailed out to folks, in the middle to late end of May there. And the tax due date this year is July 4th. And just a reminder to make sure that you've claimed your homeowner grant as well by July 4th. That's a provincial program, so you can go online and claim it virtually. All right, so 2022 was a very challenging year. When we look back at some of the cost pressures and things that we faced, and we presented some of those to council as well, but I think everybody's been aware, just, you hear these new terms that supply chain issues and things like that we just became part of the regular news cycle. In 2022, we had an average inflation of 6.8%. It hit a high of 8.1% in the middle of the year, which was, something we hadn't seen for decades before that. We saw fuel go up 26%. We've had our property insurance rates go up 28%. WorkSafe BC premiums in some of our groups have gone up 30%. So it's been a very challenging year. But we've worked hard to try and mitigate some of those cost pressures as well. Build up inventory where we can, try and order things in advance, make use of our surpluses and reserves to sort of fund those one-time costs so that we're relieving some of the pressure on property taxes. We worked with our departments, as I mentioned, to try and contain budgets where we can, and also prioritize certain projects. If, there's things that need to be done, they're done. If there's some that can be delayed to where we might be able to see some better pricing, then that's what we've done. Again, just sort of a recap on the inflation piece here. I think it's sort of an important reminder that we've seen inflation come down a little bit. It's 8.1% in the middle of the year. February was 5.25%, but that's 5.25% inflation over 12 months prior, where we had 5.69% inflation. So if you look at what's happening with the consumer price index, we've just slowed the growth of inflation, but we're still seeing increases. And that's, of course, something we're still catching up a little bit from 2022 and trying to contain these costs in our 2023 budget. So now I'm going to turn things over to Amy Mooney, our Deputy CFO. She's going to walk you through the highlights or summary of some of the various departments and the budget changes for 2023.
Thanks, Chris. So in general government, we have some exciting projects coming up in 2023. As Kevin mentioned earlier, Council will be completing their strategic planning this spring. The planning department will also be starting the new official community plan. To reduce some impacts on taxes, we've used reserves to cover some of these one-time costs. The general inflationary increases have been offset with some one-time projects that we won't see again in 2023, such as the election. In protective services, Nelson Police Department will have all members back to work in 2023, which will reduce the amount of overtime required and allow the members to take their allotted vacation. As Chris mentioned before, WCB has seen an increase of 30% this year, resulting in some of that increase. In fire and emergency management, there's a new executive position to assist with grant applications. These costs will be offset partially by the grant funding, as well as an existing position shifting to a part-time role. They also have an increase in training costs just to catch up on some training that was delayed during COVID. In engineering and public works, we're seeing an overall decrease for 2023. The biggest factor of this is the decrease in snow removal. In 2022, we included a one-time funding of $190,000 after that large snowfall in January of 2022. So far in 2023, it's looking to be a lot much better, and we expect it to be more in line with 2021, and we think that it's a sufficient budget in there. 2023 will also be heavily focused on capital, so we expect some of our in-house labor to be appropriately allocated to those capital projects. Waste and organics has been impacted by the general inflationary increases, as well as the regional district tipping fees that have gone up 10%. We're excited about the new organics pilot program with the food cyclers that should be starting soon. We've received some substantial grants for those operating costs. As you saw on your water and wastewater bills, those resource recovery fees have remained unchanged from 2022 at $100. In recreation, we're seeing an increase in our youth center participation and programs, an increase in the COVID recovery grant phase 2. That's hopefully going to be wrapped up soon. We're just finalizing some of the applications and reviewing those, and we're hoping to come to council to present our recommendations later in April. In parks, the general inflationary increases are offset slightly by some one-time projects that happened in 2022, such as the invasive species projects. The library presented their board-approved budget to council back on December 6th with an increase of 4% due to general inflationary increases, as well as to offset the removal of library fines. So if you're doing some spring cleaning and you find some old library books, you're more than welcome to bring them back and trade them in for some new ones at no cost. So where do we get our funding from to cover these expenses? As you can see from this pie graph, 50% of it does come from property taxes. So with every 1% increase in expenses, that would mean a 2% increase in taxes if all other funding was to stay the same. Being the city of Nelson, we are very entrepreneurial in the way that we bring in revenue, whether that's additional grant funding or fees for service, such as parking. So hopefully not all of those amenities that we get in the city fall on the taxpayers. Sometimes we can get some out of the tourists as well. The total operating expense budget is roughly $23 million, broken down in these general categories. This percentage breakdown stays pretty consistent year over year. We did see a slight increase in the allocation to reserves this year as we lead into some pretty heavy capital years coming up. I'll now pass this back to Chris to talk about what this means to you as a taxpayer.
Okay, thanks, Amy. Just a lot of folks probably already know how the assessment process works, but you get in January your property assessment, and those are valuations as of July 1st of 2022. What your change in assessed value doesn't necessarily translate to what your change in property taxes will be. It really depends on how your change in assessment was relative to others in the community. So, if you have an average change in your assessment, you'll probably see an average tax increase. If your change in assessment was higher than average, your tax rate might be slightly higher than average, and vice versa. If it was lower than average, your tax increase might be lower than average. So in Nelson in 2023, that average assessed value change was 5.3% for a residential home and 8.15% for commercial. It's down slightly as a percentage from sort of the highs that we saw last year. We had 26% almost for residential last year and 23% for commercial. Still an increase. It's interesting when we put this chart together and pegging 2013 at $100,000 of assessed value. If you look now 10 years later, 2023, that's almost double over that period. So if you had a $100,000 home, which didn't exist, but if you had that, it would be worth $200,000 now. Just as far as the business class multiple, this is something that we like to show each year. Now, this is the ratio between what the business class tax is versus the residential. So we try to keep residential property taxes around 75% of the total, and 25% is the business commercial side of it. And the resulting ratio or multiple that we call is 2.54% for Nelson. It's on the lower end of that scale. It's kind of around what you would see in the BC rural at 2.45, but quite a bit lower than we see in some of the neighboring communities here. So I think we're very, as far as being open and accommodating to the commercial class. I think it's a reasonable place to have a commercial business here in Nelson. So what does that all mean to that average home in Nelson? If you had, that average home, it would be worth in 2023 $674,000. Like I say, it's gone up that 5.3%. So if your 2022 average municipal tax would have been $1,830, the budget that we've put together here is for a 5.8% property tax increase. So that would be an increase of $106 per year, or $8.85 a month. But I think it's important to look holistically at the budget, and that's what this is a whole city budget. So we've got, water, wastewater, and resource recovery as well. And if you look at, all the services that the city provides, as far as when you turn your tap on and water comes out, and you flush your toilet and water goes out, and the snow's removed and the roads are patched, and we've got the sweepers out there right now on the streets, and the parks are starting to come alive. But all of those services together, we had a 2% increase in the water, 2% in the wastewater, and no increase for resource recovery. So overall, the increase to this average single-family dwelling was 4.2% in 2023. So we've, over the past, we've really endeavored to try and keep that overall tax and fee increase at inflation or below levels. So if you look at 2019, the overall increase was 1.9%, and annual inflation was also 1.9%. 2020 was a bit of an anomaly in that we had we had deflation in 2020 due to COVID-19. We had already adopted some water and wastewater rates prior to that, so we were a little higher at 1.8%. But in the subsequent years, we've had a 1.6% overall increase in 2021 when we were facing 3.4% inflation. 2022, 6.8 was the average inflation, and we had a 3.9% overall fee and taxation increase. This year, 4.2%, and inflation in February, just most recent result, was 5.2%. So, on average, that was a 2.7% rate increase when inflation was at 3.6%. So I think we've done well over that 5 years of really trying to find ways to keep the budget in line with those inflationary increases. On the commercial side, we look at things a little bit differently and say, okay, what would a commercial property that's $1 million, what would the taxation be and water and wastewater on that? We pick a commercial restaurant just so we can get some rates for water and sewer. So for that commercial property that's $1 million now would have been worth $925,000 in, that should say 2022, which is an 8.15% increase. So overall, the fees and property taxes on that building would be a 4.6% increase. And it's also important to remind folks that when they do get their tax notice, only 48% or $48 out of that 100 is from the City of Nelson. There's also school taxes on there, regional district taxes. There's BC Assessment Authority, MFA, and Regional Hospital on there as well. So while the City of Nelson tax increase might be 5.8%, we don't have any control over what those other entities might be having for their increases. We don't know what the school district or school tax will be yet. We did hear that the regional district tax increase for Nelson was 7.07%, so that will be in here. Usually these ratios stay pretty close. The regional district's gone up a couple of dollars over the past few years, and the City of Nelson's come down a couple of dollars over the past few years as well. So just as far as some of the capital projects, Kevin touched on quite a few of these in the beginning. I'll just expand on them slightly and talk about them. We have a very ambitious capital plan for 2023, $17.7 million in the budget for that. 37% of that funded through grants, which I think is important to note. So we'll be wrapping up the pier project this year. That was a large project that's gone over for a couple of years. The overall budget for that was 4.6 million. We've got 2.2 million left for 2023, and that was funded 1.5 million of that from grants. The crews have started back out there again for the spring. That work will continue over the summer. If folks are sort of interested on an update on that one, there was a March 28th, there was a highlight that came out. You can see it on the city's website that sort of shows where that project's at right now and sort of what the plans are for the coming weeks on that. The Civic Center is another exciting project. There's actually 3 different components to this one. There is a low carbon renewal, which is a grant funded portion. The budget for that's 5.3 million, and we received grant funding of almost 3.9 million for that. There's the accessibility portion as well. As Kevin mentioned, only 5% of that building is currently considered accessible, and this project will open that up to closer to 90% accessibility. We had applied for a grant and were not successful in that piece, but we've gone out and applied for another one. And that project will go on regardless, but we are always looking for opportunities to try and find other sources of funding. And the Theater Society also has a grant-funded project as well that's going to work in there to expand that theater to have 3 screens. So lots going on at the Civic. The planning stage, the detailed design has just started, and more to come. Kevin also mentioned the Transit Exchange. We'll be starting some detailed design work on that, but that'll really create a new hub for, I think, the downtown and bringing people to a central location there. The budget for that over the next 2 years is 2.4 million, and almost 2 million of that is funded through grants and from BC Transit. So very exciting project there, and again, we'll be able to share more information and more detailed designs as that starts to unfold. The Food Cycler program will be starting up shortly with folks that are in Fairview and those that are on the early adopters list. It's a pilot program. We did receive, again, some substantial grant funding for this project, and then we'll kind of regroup and analyze the results and make some decisions on what phase 2 of this program will look like. Cottonwood Park. We received, again, some grant funding for this project. This would be the tail end of that to work on the parking area, to kind of create some better flow for traffic and for cars, especially during the markets, and also to keep the dust down during the summer, again, to help kind of keep things in the air and everything cleaner down there for the market season. And that should wrap things up and be ready to go this year. And then Welcome to Nelson signs, again, another grant-funded project. This is 100% grant-funded. There'll be 3, Welcome to Nelson signs will be replaced. 2 of them will be in the existing locations. So those are just the fabrication of those being started now, and those will finish in June. And then shortly after that, we'll try and get those installed. The one coming from Weimar will be at a slightly different location, a little closer to town, but the other 2 will be in their same spots. Again, more grant funding, a couple of exciting projects for active transportation to do some sidewalk improvements in Fairview, as well as various locations to provide some more bike parking. And on top of that, we have our just regular annual paving program that we do. We have an annual budget of about $1 million that we put into paving, into streets, into sidewalks, and that's funded through our Capital Works reserve, which receives its funding from coins from street parking. So it's an ongoing plan, but you can see all the work that's been done since 2019 and some of those locations that are scheduled to be done in 2023. So just to talk briefly about some of the work on the utilities as well. And again, if folks are interested, there's quite a detailed couple of presentations from November 14th and December 5th on the council agenda packages. You can go in there and see some details on the work that's been done on the water and wastewater. But I'll just touch on a few things. You know, we're finishing up the tail end of some of the secondary source projects that were part of the water master plan. There was a $6 million grant-funded project there to, as Kevin mentioned at the beginning, to bring Sellis and Anderson together into our Mountain Station reservoir. The phase 4 of that will be going on in 2023, and that's to do some treated water storage. We do have the reservoir up there, but that's untreated water, so having the treated water storage is really essential to being able to have, you know, a ready source of water, especially, you know, for fire flows and things like that, after it's already been treated and had that residency time in the chlorination tank. On the wastewater side, you know, we just completed our wastewater master plan. And the recommended approach for that was to look at doing a liquid waste management plan. So we'll be rolling that out here in 2023 over the next 3 years with the goal of working towards you know, a more detailed plan on what the wastewater treatment plant replacement or improvements will look like. And that's coming down the road. But for the next 3 years, we'll kind of be working on that liquid waste management plan and doing some more long-term planning on replacing that treatment plant. Both of the water and wastewater reserves, or water and wastewater utilities, are driven strongly. They're very capital intensive, so they're driven strongly by reserves and the balances in those reserves. So this chart here and the one on the next slide just show you those reserve balances. The line there shows you the capital reserve balance. We'll be looking for the water side to build that up over 2024, 25, and 26. In 2027 and 2028, they're pretty capital intensive years there as well, as we look at the 5 Mile line and replacing that. And then again, once that's completed, look to build up those reserves again. On the wastewater side, a bit of a different story. Again, we're sort of looking out though to that 27, 28 period where we start to look at the wastewater treatment plant and the replacement of that. So we're building up reserves in anticipation of that. There will be some borrowing required, as you can see sort of on the chart below as well, as we get out into that project. But for the next 3 years, it's focusing on that liquid waste management plan, and then working into the capital side of it. Nelson Hydro, as I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, had their open house and their budget presentations quite early in the year in September, and that's just to align with the BC Utility Commission requirements for applying for our 2023 rate increase. Just as a general overview, you know, they're seeing, again, the same inflationary challenges that we are. Fortis power purchase costs, which are approximately half of our expenses, Fortis rates went up 3.99%, so that drives quite a bit of our operating costs. We did decrease the budget for major storm repair as we look to sort of smooth that a little bit better with having a storm reserve where we can put money into it in those years where we're not as impacted by storms, and then draw from it on those years where we do have you know, those larger storms that occur. You know, it's very difficult to budget for major storms, so that seemed to be a good approach to kind of smoothing that a little bit. And again, the same property insurance increases that have impacted the city are also impacting Nelson Hydro. On the capital side of things, you know, major capital project going on right now is the Mill Street substation upgrades. That's a $3.4 million project in 2023. You know, so that's kind of the focal point, I think, for 2023. This is the similar chart that I showed you for the water and wastewater as far as seeing what those reserve balances look like. Nelson Hydro tries to keep that in that sort of $4 to $9 million range. So the reserve balance dips a little bit there, but it stays within that band, target band for the utility. Again, just to sort of a recap on those projects, Mill Street Substation is kind of the focal point for this year. There's some other smaller projects that they're doing. And again, I would encourage you that if you want more details on that to kind of take a look at some of the presentations that Nelson Hydro put together. And there's quite a bit of detail there on some of the capital plan. So looking forward, as I mentioned at the beginning, we are seeing, reduced inflationary pressures, which is a good sign. As we kind of look forward to 2023 and beyond, the Bank of Canada's anticipating that we'll kind of get back to that target of 2% inflation in 2024. We've seen a lot of our major capital projects coming to completion, which is exciting. The Pier project, Cottonwood Park, the Welcome to Nelson signs, things that have sort of been on there for last year and the year before, and a lot of planning leading up to them. We should see those finishing in 2023, which is really exciting. And I think we're entering the year in a very strong financial position too. We have healthy reserve balances. We're able to use those in these times where we have high inflation. We were able to prioritize and kind of focus on the projects that were ongoing and getting those wrapped up, and also the ones, as far as our paving program and just kind of keeping that consistent. I'm looking forward to kind of regrouping with council and coming up with those new strategic priorities and setting that vision for the next 4 years and beyond. So, I think it's an exciting time, and I think the sun is shining outside, and I sort of feel that as far as the budget as well.
As only your CFO can say.
And so again, not a lot of folks were able to join us today, and maybe that is because of the sun outside, which is great. But please email us, budget@nelson.ca. We're monitoring that every day. We're happy to write back. We're happy to share those questions with our department heads and other folks that might be better able to answer them, and share them with council as well. So, drop us a line. Thank you.
Okay, and I'd like to say on behalf of Mayor Morrison, who has been listening in and participating remotely, that she wants to pass on her thank you to our finance staff, so to our CFO, Deputy CFO, and to our whole team there, and to our CAO for his leadership. It's been an arduous budget process, but you've done it with grace, and you've shepherded this council through I think a set of tough decisions, but we got to a place that, as you say, it puts the city into a strong position, and the sun is shining on this community. I know that you have space, or we have space for some questions from our audience. So, if anybody in the public would like to come forward, I think you'd also have a chance to mingle afterwards. If not now.
May I just ask if there's a deadline for feedback?
No, I mean, as far as, it'll probably be, in March here? In April that we'll do 3 readings of our, we don't pass that until, the final reading, as I mentioned, until May the 12th. So, no deadline, but if you have some thoughts, feel free to share them right away.
I have a couple of questions. This is a 5-year budget. Did the city always do a 5-year budget, or is it kind of a new thing?
No, we're required to do a 5-year financial plan.
Okay.
So that's always, the focus is always on next year. Once you get out 5 years, it's really difficult to know what we're going to be seeing, right? But we do try to put together a 5-year financial plan. We have to. And on the capital side, we look out even further than that. If you look at our water and wastewater, we're looking out 20 years to try and make sure that we've got a plan in place.
Okay, great, thanks. And you received the $4 million from the province of BC. How is that actually going to flow into? Is that flowing into this budget process, or is that?
No, that hasn't been captured in this budget.
Okay.
That was something quite recent. The requirement is that those funds be placed in a special reserve just for those funds, and there's some, we just received a letter, you know, maybe a week ago that sort of dictates what types of things that can be used for. So I think that's more of a, you know, 2024 piece of kind of looking to, okay, what are the requirements? Getting council's strategic priorities in place, kind of looking ahead at how we can best utilize those funds and make the most use of them, best impact, and staying within those guidelines. So, yeah, that hasn't been factored into this budget.
Great. And I have one more question, if that's okay. Parks, recreation and cultural services, I see that like there's a slight increase in 2023, but then a decrease in the budget. So, and then there's a note here, one-time projects down.
Yeah.
It's a down arrow.
Yes, yeah.
So I
there-
was just curious about that,
Yeah.
because I always find it confusing because parks, recreation, like it's such
Yes,
a
there's a lot in there.
huge amount.
Totally.
And then when you
Yeah.
look at the arts and heritage sector, like it's embedded in there somewhere, but
Yes.
it's very difficult to
Yeah.
figure out where it is exactly.
So the major decrease in 2024 is because of that COVID recovery grant that's in 2023, and that's 200,000 in there. So that's a one-time grant
Okay.
that we'll be putting out. Also, if you are interested in looking at a more granular level, that is broken out in the May 14th budget discussions, and it's the full sheet, and it will break out all of the Parks and Rec line items as well.
March 14th.
March 14th.
March 14th.
Yeah,
sorry.
March
But
14th.
I'm reading that there's actually not an increase, like this increase only is because of the COVID recovery. But in terms of the planning of the overall city budget, there's actually not an increase in parks and recreation budget.
Well, we normally try to put an inflationary increase into the full each year over the 5 years. But some things go up and down. As you know, as Amy mentioned, you have 2023 $200,000 budget to give to community groups for COVID recovery, and then in 2024 you don't have that. But then you have a slight increase because of inflation. So there's a bit of up and down that occurs.
Yeah, no, I was more curious about, just to
Yeah.
go step back again, like I don't see like a steady increase in that budget
Mhm.
over the next 5 years.
Amy,
Like I think
I would-
that's where I'm getting it.
I don't know if Amy has the details there, but I forget what the overall, there was an increase for the cultural sector this year.
Yeah, 10%.
Well, and to the capital in particular,
Yeah. I think we did
10%,
10%.
10%,
It's not-
10% to
yeah,
touchdowns, 10% to the
So
capital.
I'm just like,
Yeah.
I'm not here for the capital.
Yeah,
here,
no,
like,
fair
I'm
enough.
just here
No, that
for
was
the-
on-
as
that was
a
on the
citizen
operating
in
side.
general, being curious about, like, of course, that sector, because I work in the sector of the increase.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Thank
no, overall, we have inflationary increases in there. Sometimes they're difficult to pull out because some large things do come out or go in, or that kind of thing. But overall, there is an inflationary increase into each year.
And wouldn't we have to look back further than 2022 to see what the increase was? Because 2022 was also impacted by COVID relief funds, right?
Correct. There's
So if that's included in 22 and 23, then 24 is probably coming back to what the,
Pre-COVID kind of.
yeah, if you take that and average those out, if you take those 200s out of both years, I don't know what 2021 is, but I'm just assuming it was here, bump, and then back on the line.
I think if you looked at 21 versus 23 and said, how much was that percentage increase over those, between those 2 years?
It would be the average.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, good questions.
Just a quick question on the timescale when set up the 5-year budget. Is that kind of like set in stone for the next 5 years, or will we be sitting down down again next year and giving another.
You can enjoy this all again next year.
Okay.
Hopefully it'll be a little faster next year because we'll
It's a
have
rolling budget,
got an
Rory.
understanding of what we're doing.
It's a
and
rolling
hopefully-
budget, so the 5-year budget just keeps getting updated every year.
Yeah,
But I mean, one of the reasons for it is, you know, we're already in 2023 and we're looking at a 2023 budget. So part of it is 2022, we passed a budget that had 2022 and 2023. So that does give us the ability to still work within our budget. We had a budget for 2023 that we passed last year, if that makes sense. Now we're just revising that, refining it, adding in some things that we know to be true now and kind of projecting ahead for the next 5 years. So it's just kind of an ongoing piece, yeah.
And one last one.
Sure.
Looking forward to council strategic priorities. So there's this, our vision is supported by 4 strategic goals. But for like the coming year, council is looking at like the overall priorities for moving into the next year.
Yeah, so there'll
Or
be.
are those priorities already set now for this year?
Well, yes and no. You know, obviously, projects that are underway are difficult to change partway through. So that's why, you know, the update that I gave here, I also gave that to council as part of the budget process. And as you saw from the presentation by Amy and Chris, you saw, you know, a number of those things in this budget. You know, we don't turn on a dime, so you know, probably realistically, what's in place now is in this financial plan, and will carry forward. We, you know, financial plan can always be amended, and you know, you can make some changes. But once we tax, then we tax. Once we've, you know, sent out utility notices, we can't, you know, halfway through the year say we're going to increase water another $10 or something. So our revenues are pretty established. You know, obviously we are continuing to apply for grants, and if, you know, we get other grants, or, you know, a project comes up and we want to use reserves or something that we already have, or do some borrowing, we can do all those things. So there is some flexibility, but I would say realistically, you know, anything larger probably you'd be looking at probably 24, 25, 26 for those things to happen. You know, certainly we can, you know, adjust some of this, you know, the direction we're going, but I would say, you know, those capital projects that are in place, you know, the core funding for, you know, our recreation, our culture, our parks, et cetera, I think all those things, those are harder to change mid-year, but it probably takes some time to do that.
Oh, yeah, for sure. So how can we then, as a citizen, how can I get engaged in new priorities?
We're going to do a thought exchange. We're going to send that out to the community as a whole. That will be shared with council as they set their priorities. So if there's, so certainly participate in that, or if you have other ideas that you want council to consider, you know, just send them in as part of that, you know, I guess, community outreach on looking for thoughts from the community prior to council setting. So that's why we're doing that process.
Okay, so through thought exchange or like a direct?
Yeah, I'll give some thought of, you know, how do we, you know, as we roll that out, then, you know, maybe we'll have something else to say. If there's people that just want to, you know, throw in their ideas, you know, feel, you know, here's where you can send those to. The idea of the thought exchange is, you know, other people get to say, oh, we think that's a really great idea, or not, and that gives council a better idea, you know, from a community-wide basis, you know, where those, you know, where our community wants to see some of these things happen. So I'd certainly encourage, you know, float those ideas out on thought exchange. Hopefully, you know, you see people go, oh, that's a great idea, and get behind them and that will be shared with council.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Well, this is not a meeting, so I don't have to adjourn it, but I think it feels like that's the, no more questions. And again, Chris, Amy, for your excellent work, and thank you for that presentation. Kevin, you as well. And for everybody who tuned in, we appreciate your attention and hopefully your voice as you offer input in the next month or two. Thanks.